Mom, this episode's dedicated to you. And welcome back, everyone. This is episode 9 of the Flash Reorder. And what we're going to start talking about first today is The Flash by Geoff Johns, Volume 3. This is actually personally one of my favorite eras of The Flash. I love this era to death. This is the return of Barry. This also contains my all-time favorite comic book story, which we'll get into in a bit. Actually, real quick thing, though, about this, which is pretty cool, is that this is actually the omnibus that I always thought of, where people have always asked, like, oh, what would be an omnibus that you would want to have collected? And I've always said I would love to have this era of The Flash collected as one omni. And here it is, right now, Volume 3. Here we go. Let's open this bad boy up. Alright, so here we are. We got the interior, spine, back. This also specifically collects Final Crisis Rogue's Revenge 1 for free, The Flash Rebirth 1 for 6, Blackest Night, The Flash 1 for free, The Flash 1 for 12, we'll get there, The Flash Secret Files and Origins 2010 number 1, and Flashpoint 1 for 5. Alright, let's open up this bad boy. Beautiful art by Francis Manapul, my all-time favorite artist. Another reason I love this era so much. So yeah, so before we get into to the start of things, we're going to first start off with a Final Crisis tie-in. Final Crisis Rogue's Revenge. This is basically a tie-in to what's been going on during Final Crisis. It kind of acts almost as like a weird like epilogue to all the stuff that was happening with like Fastest Man Alive and all that. So basically, the Rogues have returned. They were at one point sentenced to salvation, which is the thing that, yes, that's where Peacemaker was sent to, and at the end of Peacemaker season 2. So yes, we're going to be adapting that into the DCU at some point. But yes, the Rogues were sent there for the crime of them killing the Flash, or specifically Kid Flash, as they kept referring to him, which I found funny. But yeah, but now they eventually escaped salvation, and now they're back in Central City, and of course they're back where all hell has gone. All hell has gone loose. Final Crisis is going on. They come back. They see their lab has been taken over by Trickster and like his new gang apparently. Laurel and Shire here. It's actually cool too because like this is actually drawn by Scott Collins, so in a way it almost acts as like another part of like Johns' original Flash run. And this is a cool moment here. So this is where we're leading up, where we're getting like Barry's return. Iris at one point she's just sitting like reflecting like memories of like Barry, and all of a sudden these lightning storms keep happening throughout this entire book or throughout this entire story. Everything going on during Final Crisis. And at one point, she hears this sound of thunder so loud, and she hears this voice that calls out to her, Iris. And she thinks it's Barry. And we also have this guy, Libria, who's like a big part of the Final Crisis event. Basically, what he's trying to do is he's trying to recruit the Rogues to his secret society, and the Rogues have absolutely no interest in it. After what happened with like Bart, they more or less they just want to get out of the game. They want to retire. They want to get away from the heat because they, of course, did the worst, biggest heat that they could do, which is killing a Flash, which they didn't need to do. But also, while all this is going on, Inherita ends up breaking out of his frozen state thanks to a certain other speedster who we'll see in a second. He was broken out thanks to Zoom. That's right, Hunter is back. And what's Hunter's new agenda now? Hunter wants him to be the new Kid Flash, now that Bart is gone. Why? It's, who knows? Basically, he feels like because Bart failed like Zoom's whole section is still he's trying to make heroes better than what they should be, and he feels like a hero that would be a better Kid Flash, and he's trying to make him into Kid Flash. A hero that has no interest in that, as well as the Rogues. Yeah, there is a moment here where eventually the Rogues, at one point, they end up taking down these newer Rogues who were trying to like be like them, and yeah, that doesn't last long. Well, until eventually they find out at one point that Captain Cold's father has been kidnapped by Luria and his like minions, basically as a way to get them to join him. So now the Rogues basically have to go save Captain Cold's father. And they eventually do find him. He has a confrontation with his father. His father is, of course, a terrible, terrible human being. And Cold decides, you know what? He doesn't deserve to live, but he can't do it. Cold still can't do it because at the end of the day, it's his dad. So he makes Mick do it, and Mick burns him alive. Burn it all. Now, there's another thing that happens at 1.2. Luria ends up kidnapping Wonder Wizard's baby, if you remember the baby back from earlier in the Johns run. Wonder Wizard's kid. And while this is going on, Hera eventually does wear the costume. But eventually he's gonna snap. Here's Luria. And then Hera does snap and become Kid Zoom to fully become Zoom's sidekick. And he ends up trying to kill Luria. And at one point, ends up taking down Hunter. Basically, he unravels Hunter's ability for being part of the other timeline and his time travel to the point where he basically takes away Hunter's powers and Hunter's back to like being a normal guy. And then at one point now he's trying to take out the Rogues, which also at one point he does, because actually another thing that does happen here is before all this, Inherita kills Wonder Wizard's baby. I kind of skipped over it. I didn't want to show it. I mean, again, YouTube, and yeah, I just didn't want to show it. But yeah, he does end up, fortunately, killing the baby. But the Rogues do take him down, and they send him directly to the cops. Tell the Flash we're even, the Rogues. Leave him a note. And then, of course, this is probably the coolest moment in the book. Where it's right near the end, it's the end of the story. And there is a rumor going around. Luria does tell the Rogues at one point that the original Flash is back. Not the original Flash. The Central City Flash, a.k.a. Barry. And the Rogues basically mean, oh no, we're fucked. Because Wally was one thing. Wally would let him go, do their thing and all that. Barry didn't, like, brutalize them, but Barry didn't exactly let them get away with stuff compared to what Wally did. So Cole basically now knows it's like, okay, if he's back, the Rogues are going to stay, and the game has definitely changed. And then we go into here. This is now the next series, The Flash Rebirth. By Geoff Johns, Ethan Van Sciver. This is my all-time favorite comic book. So the story starts where a mysterious person ends up killing a couple of lab technicians at CCPD. Person with a wand with a lightning bolt on top. We don't know what that's about. But something does happen. Something that happens, which is very similar to Barry's origin. Mixing a couple chemicals, mixing some lightning. Boom. New Speedster. But while that's going on, Central City, everyone else is getting ready to celebrate Barry's return, including all the members of the Justice League, Justice Society. Everyone's happy that Barry is back. Wally's, of course, with his kids. Iris is back as well. They're reunited. The only one who's a little hesitant about it is Bart, who admittedly doesn't really have much of a relationship with Barry, even though it is his grandfather. And something that this run will tackle a bit is the relationship with Bart and Barry, getting to like kind of know each other. But Bart is basically okay, I'll say this. Bart is basically kind of what most fans, while this book was going on, were saying, which is basically, Wally's the Flash. Why is Barry back? Why does he have to be here? Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. We don't listen to that. At least I don't. But anyway. Wally fans, I love you guys, but yeah. Anyway, this is, Barry's back. He's here. I will say, though, admittedly, the one thing that's interesting about this book, because again, this is Flash Rebirth. This is similar to what Johns did with Hal Jordan for Green Lantern Rebirth, where he basically restored things and made Hal back into the main Green Lantern. It's very similar to what he's doing here with the Flash, making Barry the main Flash again. The only problem is that Green Lantern, I felt like, had a little bit more, you could jump into it and be fine. Flash Rebirth, the only thing I will say is that I feel like you should at least, I don't want to say you feel like you have to read that Final Crisis, but you should at least maybe just read a couple of those pages where Barry actually comes back, because you see him come back in Final Crisis. Like, in Flash Rebirth, we just start where Final Crisis ended, where here he is, he's back. So, just to give a heads up on that. Barry's in the Flash Museum, looking around, see all the stuff that's been going on, where he's been gone all these years. So now this is the next important thing that happens in this book. So this is basically the book where, I'm sure most fans probably know this origin, but I will explain it anyway. This is the book that revamped Barry's origin. This is where we get the story of how Barry decides to become a Central City police forensic scientist because of the death of his mother. All that stuff that's in the show, that's in the movie, it starts here. That's where all this came from. So we get the flashback of him as a child, losing his mother, and then at one point while these flashbacks are going on, all of a sudden a random hand comes out of Barry's chest. He's like, what the hell? And all of a sudden, it's Savitar. Savitar is somehow imbued within Barry and the Speed Force. I'll explain it. But then eventually, as he's ready to chase Savitar, he touches Savitar. Savitar overloads and then crumbles into dust. This will not be the first time Savitar does something like this in this reorder. So, get ready for that. But also, because of what Barry does, where he touches Savitar, he also does something that affects all the other speedsters, or people that are, like, connected to the Speed Force, including Bart, Wally's kids, Jay, basically all the speedsters. So it's like, what is going on? But one of the things that's cool and interesting about the story, too, is that all this is going on where Barry is still kind of more or less like, he doesn't really he's not really accepting about being back yet. Like, he's kind of just like, why was I brought back? Like, why? Like, while he's been the main guy, while he's been taking over for me, it's been perfectly fine. I've been in the Speed Force all these years. Why am I back? So, like, everyone else seems to be happy he's back except for him. And Barry's just constantly on the run, constantly overthinking stuff. Very much like me. Why I relate to him so much. We get this nice flashback of when him and Iris first meet. The blue bow tie, the bow ties he used to wear in the Silver Age, that comes back here. I like this page too. This is a cool little. This is a cool little flashback to see certain things where he ends up seeing his father in prison. He also sees what happens where he ends up killing Fawn, and then him and Iris run right to the future. Nice little summary stuff. Also, one of the things that is funny that they do is that they do explain how Barry comes back in the world of public and be like, "Oh, I thought you were dead." They basically say that he was under witness protection. One point they get into a fight with one of Savitar's disciples. But then eventually, this other energy, this other lightning hits Barry. And Barry ends up becoming the new Black Flash. A lot goes on in this book. But I do love this book so much. I love this book. This is basically where I started The Flash. This is actually one of the first books of The Flash I ever read. Like, I remember I just bought the trade, I was interested in the character, and this is what made me fall in love with the character. And I wanted to learn more. So at one point, this energy's still going on. Barry decides, you know what, I'm too much of a danger. I never should have been brought back. So he decides, you know what, I'm just going to run back to the Speed Force. Superman, of course, is trying to stop him. And they probably get one of my all-time favorite comic book moments, one of my all-time favorite Flash moments, even one of my favorite Superman moments, because Superman's part of it. Where, for years, it's always been the question of who's faster, Flash or Superman. At this moment here, Geoff Johns finally states it out and says, Flash is faster. Because at one point, Superman mentions the races that they had with each other. Basically saying Superman's like, hey, I keep up with you too. And then Barry has this great moment where he goes, those were for charity, Clark. And just zooms completely away from Superman, leaving him in the dust. So basically admitting that Barry, during those races, was holding back and he could have easily beaten Superman. Which is awesome. And now he's in the Speed Force. He finds Johnny and Max. Johnny and Max are there as well. And someone else is there as well. I'll give you a guess. I shifted you into reverse. Fawn is here. He's back as well. And this is probably one of my favorite moments in the book, too. I love this moment specifically, where Barry's talking about how him and Bruce used to compare each other's villains. Like, they would compare, like, how much of a threat they are to each other. Like, even certain things where it'll be like, Two-Face and Captain Cold, Killer Croc and Gorilla Grodd, the Joker, and the Reverse Flash. And I love this moment too. I love the way Johns writes it, where he goes, he's back, and he's different. His after image is sheer, sneer, and grin, then disappears as he inhales them. And this is probably one of my favorite lines in the book. When he speaks, it crackles with static. You're early. So eventually we find out what's been going on is Fawn somehow got resurrected. I'll explain how he gets resurrected later on. But basically when he got resurrected, he decided to go into the Speed Force and make his own version of the Speed Force, aka the Negative Speed Force, and imbue that into Barry. Why would he imbue that into Barry specifically? Because we find out in this book that Barry is actually the creator of the Speed Force. The Speed Force started when that lightning bolt first hit Barry. All this stuff started when the lightning bolt hit Barry way back in Showcase number 4. I know it doesn't make complete total sense because of the stuff I talked about in the Wave run, but it still works in a way. But yes, like, Barry is the progenitor of the Speed Force. The Speed Force comes from him. That's where this all started. So Fawn makes his own negative Speed Force to use that, to imbue that into Barry and affect all the other speedsters. Basically, making Barry come back just to make his life miserable again. And it's a cool moment, too. I love this image of Wally. Wally's running the Speed Force to go after him. Probably one of my favorite images of Wally West. The art in here is fantastic. Get some cool action here. This is a cool moment, too, where Fawn basically uses the, he actually takes away Jay's aura so that Jay ends up going on fire because he doesn't have the friction or the aura to protect him anymore. I know I kind of like skimming the story a bit here, but I don't want to give too much of it away. But yes, eventually Fawn does get out. He threatens to go after Wally's family, especially when Wally comes to the Speed Force to try to help Barry out. And also, Max Mercury comes back as well, which Bart's happy about because Max was gone for a while. And then eventually, though, they all get out. Jay Garrick, Wally West, Bart Allen, Barry Allen. I'm back, Fawn. But this time, it's on my terms. Barry eventually gets out of the Speed Force with Wally. So we have a big showdown with Fawn versus all the speedsters. Cool moment here I love is he actually says this where he's like, I learned this from a friend of Wally's, and does the zoom snap to them, which is pretty cool. Originally, I remember when I first saw that, I didn't really get that reference, and then when I went back and eventually read the early John stuff, like, I was like, oh, that's what the reference is. Okay. And this is probably one of the coolest moments ever, and probably I would say my favorite splash page ever, where at one point Wally gets everyone else to make their own Speed Force suits to re-energize, and we get all the speedsters running. Jesse Quick, Max Mercury, Bart Allen, Barry Allen, Wally West in a new costume to make him different from Barry so they don't look exactly alike, which I like. Bring him back to more of his 90s costume, 90s look. Irie, and Jay. All together. But after all that nice family stuff, Fawn decides, you know what? It's time for you and me to talk for a bit. They do go back. They go back to the Speed Force for a bit. They go talk for a bit. Okay. Y'all know what's coming. Do you remember the day you broke your arm in the 6th grade? But when you looked back, no one was there. Do you remember the electrical fire that burned down your first house in Fallville? Or the day you moved to Central City and you left the back door open, your dog ran out and got hit by a car? What if every bad thing that happened to you was orchestrated by one person? By an enemy you haven't even made yet. I opened the door, Barry. I started the fire. I pushed you down the stairs. And as Barry is hearing all this, he realizes something else. You did it, didn't you? You son of a bitch. Yes. I murdered your mother, Barry. Just for all you people, it was me, Barry. This is where the meme's from. But meme or not, I still think this moment is freaking great. And this is the moment where I was like, Reverse Flash Professor Zoom is the greatest villain of all time. Petty, don't care. Still awesome. Love this moment. And I love the idea of a villain just torturing the hero. And eventually, after all that reveal, Fawn does decide, you know what, to finally cut Barry off, to cut him off from his, from him once and for all. He's going to make sure he doesn't ever become the Flash again. I'm going to kill Iris, because that's originally why he decided to kill Barry's mom, because he thought doing that would have given Barry such tragedy that he would not have become the Flash and would have changed things. It did not. If anything, it made him better and inspired him more to be more of a hero. And to get on a personal note and to explain the opening, I lost my mother at a young age. And this is actually the reason why the Flash is my favorite character, specifically Barry Allen's, because I relate to losing a mother like Barry did. So I've always kind of stuck with that. Plus, also, there's other things with Barry I connect with him as well, being a comic nerd, being socially awkward, stuff like that. But this is one of the main reasons why, and this is why this episode is dedicated to my mother. And why these books specifically mean so much to me. And this is one of the coolest moments, too, where Barry's stuck in the Speed Force, and you got Wally here helping him out. His old sidekick, his protege stepping up. And the two of them go and decide, like, okay, well, we gotta stop Fawn, because Fawn's gonna kill Iris. He's gonna go back in time to the moment before the lightning hits to kill Iris. And Barry and Wally race there. And boom! This lightning bolt happens, and you see Barry and Wally stop Fawn. They push that wand away that Fawn was gonna use to stab Linda with. Linda finds it in the past. Iris finds it in the past. And eventually what they do with Fawn is, at one point, Barry was in this chamber made by the Justice League to keep him contained while he was the Black Flash and all that other negative energy stuff was going on. They throw Fawn into that and shut him down. And we get this cool moment. I gotta turn the book like this. I love this shot. And all this too, Barry does decide, you know what? It is good to be back. And I'm happy to be back. But then we also get one of the coolest moments ever, where Fawn is imprisoned, and then he hears Hunter Sullivan. Professor Fawn, I think we can help each other be better. That cliffhanger is not going to be resolved for another 10 years. So, just wait. Or, no, this came out 2000, another 6 years. Well, yeah, around there. Another 6 or 8 years. That will be resolved in another run. But we'll leave that there for now. But yep, now it seems like the status quo is Barry's back. Barry's back as back to his old job at the Central City Police Department. Forensics again. Him and Iris are going through their old stuff. Iris ends up finding that wand. And of course, everyone's back. Barry's back. The Justice League is having a celebration for him. And again, my all-time favorite book, and one of the stories that means the most to me, where Barry runs in, he goes, hey guys, Sorry I'm late. All right, but we're gonna take a bit of a transition here. We're gonna stop this book here for now, and we're gonna go to another omnibus because we have to talk about a certain event that Barry is more or less. Well, he's not the star. I would say he's kind of the co-star, and it does play into what goes on in the run, specifically of how Fawn was able to come back from the dead. Let's get to that book now. All right, so we're still talking about Geoff Johns. Obviously, Geoff Johns still in control here, but we're not talking about Flash right now. We're going to talk about Green Lantern for a bit, specifically the Blackest Night event. Let's open this up. All right, so to get into it real quick, Blackest Night was this huge event, awesome event. Totally recommend reading it. That has a lot more to do with the Geoff Johns Green Lantern run. But the reason I'm talking about it here is because Barry does play a pretty vital part in this. Like, it is mainly a Green Lantern event, but Barry is basically more or less the co-star because it deals a lot with characters who have died and them coming back from the dead as zombies, which is pretty cool. But one of the things that's cool and significant about this book is that this takes place like after Flash Rebirth. So this is basically Barry more or less dealing with what's been going on since he's been gone, and him unfortunately finding out that so many people died while he was away in the Speed Force. Most tragically being Ralph and Sue Dibney. So the reason I'm talking about this quick is because there are 3 Blackest Night tie-ins for the Flash that are in the Geoff Johns Omni. But I would still say, check out Blackest Night itself as a story, because one, it's a fantastic story, but also it does have Barry a lot in it, and there are like a lot of cool Flash moments. But specifically, one of the things that does happen here, let's see if I can get to it, as you go through this beautiful book. Cannot recommend the Geoff Johns Green Lantern run enough. Maybe I'll do a reading order on Green Lantern one day. He's one of my favorite characters as well. Because one thing that is cool about the event too is that at one point, Hal has to basically leave the event for a bit to go off and find the other lanterns to unite them to basically solve the problem, find the other, like, different colored lanterns. So while Hal's basically off doing that adventure in his own book, Barry basically becomes, like, the main character of Blackest Night for a bit. Which is pretty cool. So yeah, you do see him here. He's here with Wally as well. I like this moment too. Where Wally's more or less, he still kind of sees him as, like, even though Wally is Barry's equal, he still kind of sees him as his sidekick, or like sees him as, like, not as the main Flash. Like, he more or less, he gives this line where he says, where he goes, oh, so, I was the kid to your Flash. Now I'm the Nightwing to your Batman. And Barry responds, you're the Flash to my Flash, Wally. The more the merrier. Just trying to skip over to the end here real quick, because I want to talk about something significant. Pardon me. But overall, just look at this gorgeous art, man. Like, Blackest Night is, like, one of the coolest events ever. Really check it out. I would highly recommend either getting Geoff Johns Volume 2, where you can just get the Blackest Night event itself with the Green Lantern issues, or get the Blackest Night Omni that has everything. Okay, so All right, so this is what happens at one point. At one point, the heroes all do get together. They reunite the Spectrum, and they basically resurrect the power of the white light. So while the Black Lantern means death, the White Lantern means life. And one of the things that it does is it resurrects characters who died, including Maxwell Lord, Hawk, Firestorm, Martian Manhunter, who died back in Final Crisis, Captain Boomerang, who died in Identity Crisis, and specifically Vaughn, who died back in Flash 324. As well as Aquaman. And what I like this moment too is I like that they're displaying all these heroes who are back, but you see Fawn in the background kind of just sneaking in there, basically being like, oh, I'm back, but I shouldn't be noticed. And there is a moment where Barry does notice him. He's like, oh my god! And so, yes, that's how Fawn gets back. But yep. Still, check out Blackest Night. Definitely would check it out. Like I said, especially because there are a lot of Barry moments, a lot of Flash moments in here, and also it's just a fantastic story. But anyway, now we'll jump back into the Flash Zombie. Okay, now we're back to Geoff Johns Volume 3. So first off, I think this is cool. I love this cover. I like that it's like a homage to the Flash Rebirth cover. So basically now, so I talked about Blackest Night. This is now the Flash tie-ins to Blackest Night. So we get some more stuff going on. We get to see more of what's been happening in Blackest Night from the Flash world perspective. And this is a moment that happens in the actual book where Barry is running and warning all the heroes, basically not warning, but telling all the heroes, like, look, we need all the energy we can get, we need all the lightness we can get to make this white light, like, to stop the Black Lanterns. But also one of the things that does happen is, of course, like I said, I showed Captain Boomerang coming back, but before he officially comes back to life, he does come back, but not in the way you would think. Obviously, he comes back as a Black Lantern zombie. And while this happens, Owen ends up taking care of him, while also Reverse Flash is back here as a zombie. This is pretty cool. Love this image. And Barry at one point does have this sad moment where he does decide to maybe get some advice from Savitar. Savitar, his friend from Gorilla City, but of course he has no idea that Savitar died. And you see him as a Black Lantern. That's Savitar. Solvar. Excuse me. Solvar. And the Rogues are dealing with this as well. Because the thing that goes on with the Rogues is they find out what Owen is doing with Captain Boomerang. And it's not good. Owen is basically, he's taken his father, and his father is basically telling Owen to bring him people so he can feed off of them. The Rogues find out about this and they try to stop it. So that's their storyline, dealing with the zombie Boomerang. But here's also one of the other coolest moments that does happen in Blackest Night, is there's a moment where a bunch of the different DC heroes, a bunch of different Justice Leaguers, they get different color lantern rings to use and become a temporary lantern for that time. And in the case of Barry, because he's all about hope, Barry becomes a Blue Lantern. This is really cool, and I love this stuff. This is so cool. I actually used to have this shirt when I was younger. I had this shirt with the blue Flash shirt. Blue Lantern Flash. Really, really cool visual. You can get to see that cover. It's pretty cool. There is, though, at one moment where one of the things that does happen is Bart ends up being taken by the Black Lantern, because one of the things that the Black Lanterns are doing is they're more or less chasing the people who have died and come back from the past, basically have cheated death, and they want to bring them back to the dead. So that's why specifically it's cool that Blackest Night revolves around Hal and Barry, because they're both characters who have come back from the dead. They're probably two of the most famous characters to have done that. Well, Hal not so much, more Barry, but Hal, Hal went for a while. But of course Bart died at 1.2, so he becomes a Black Lantern, and Barry has to help him out. And again, this explores more of his relationship with Bart, which is actually one of the themes that happens a lot in this run, is their relationship. Getting explored. But eventually that does end their tie-ins, and again it finishes off in Blackest Night, of course. And now we get probably one of the coolest runs on The Flash. It's a small run, and of course it's still by Johns, where this is the start. This is now The Flash Volume 3, so this is going to be issues 1 through 12. So it doesn't last too long. But what's awesome about this is that the art is drawn by Francis Manapul, who is my all-time favorite comic artist. So this is basically, you get my favorite comic book writer and my favorite comic book artist working on my favorite comic book character. It's a win-win for Brian here. But yes, I do love this stuff. So now Barry's back. He's back in full duty. So in case you're wondering what's going on with Wally is more or less basically just stepping back for a bit. Wally's kind of because that's originally what he wanted to do before Bart took over. Wally did want to step back for a bit to be more of a family guy. Now he can do that, and Barry's going to take over duties as the main Flash again. Anyway, this is such a cool moment where he this kid's about to get hit by this steering wheel. Flash catches it. Kid's like, whoa! Barry, hey kid. Name's Flash. Name's the Flash. Nice to meet you, before speeding off. Great moment. And now here he's getting back to work. This is his first day back at work. And one of the things that Barry has noticed is that there have been a lot of cold cases that have been closed. And Barry's wondering why that is, and basically Daryl Fry describes or explains that the mayor basically wants the police department to solve these cases as quickly as possible. And when we mean quickly, we don't mean a full effort and not going into them in full detail. So basically a lot of cases that are unsolved, Barry's seeing that, it's yeah, we should fix that. But there is this moment here where we do find a dead Mirror Master? What's that about? But also here we get Barry's new cast of characters, including Director Singh, who will become a big part of the Flash mythos for a good while. This is Barry's boss and director of the forensics department, along with Forrest. Forrest, another supporting character we'll see for a while. This is actually one of the other reasons why I've always preferred Barry over Wally, is because I like more of his supporting cast, and I like seeing him as essential to the as a forensic scientist. And this is one of the cool things about this run, is we actually get him doing that, where it's a lot of it almost feels like a CSI Law and Order type show for a bit. And it's even cool because the stories, they're actually called cases. So they'll be this story is called The Dastardly Death of the Rogues. And they'll say, Case 1, Dastardly Death of the Rogues. And at one point, he ends up being these new versions of the Rogues, or as they call themselves, the Renegades. And this is not Captain Cold, this is Commander Cold. And apparently these guys are from the 25th century. Yes, that same century where Fawn is from. And they're here to arrest Barry. So yeah, we also get this pretty cool moment here where Flash ends up saving people from a destroyed building, and he saves all these people. But then at one point, the people who were saved from this apartment building, they're like, "We got nowhere to live," and he goes, "Be right back." And he goes to the library, studies basically architecture and contracting and all that, and reassembles the building for them. It's probably one of the coolest Flash moments ever, and what's cool about it, too, is that Ezra Miller actually talked about it, too. Like, he said that was one of his favorite moments while researching playing the character. Probably one of the nicest things that guy's ever said. We also get more with Captain Boomerang. It's Singer Harkness again. Again, he's fully back after the events of Blackest Night. Because some of this also ties into the next event that will go on, Brightest Day. Which doesn't have as much effect on the book, so I'm not going to go too much into that event. But yeah, let's just say it does tie into a little bit with that. So yeah, there is at one point where Barry meets this old lady who talks about how her son is wrongly convicted for a crime. It was a case that was shut down years ago. Barry wants to go back to it, and he notices he sees this was barely touched. What are we doing here? There's a person in jail, so Barry decides to take the case. Again, the art here is beautiful. And it's cool, too. We get some of these, side stories in between the issues. So, basically, we get Boomerangs. Remember back in the other John stuff, the Rogue Origins? This is more of that, but for Captain Boomerang. And also, we probably get one of the coolest Flash moments ever, where he runs up a building, he goes to a spinning helicopter blade, and of course, as time is moving slower for him, he literally hits the blade with perfect perception and just runs across the helicopter blade. Awesome, awesome imagery. But as we get deeper into the mystery, we find out what's going on. The Top, who is one of the renegades, he's actually trying to stop them or trying to help Barry from being arrested, or at least so we think. But before we get more into that, the Rogues end up finding this mirror. It's an old mirror that was constructed by Sam Scudder, the original Mirror Master, before he died. And it says here, in case the Flash returns, break glass. So we're going to see what's going to happen there. And the Rogues, of course, think this is this ultimate weapon to take down the Flash once and for all. Kind of the a nuclear bomb in a way. This is their nuke or their atom bomb. Break glass just in case. So eventually, Barry does get into a fight. Barry and the Top do get into this confrontation with all the Rogues, including Captain Boomerang, who uses the boomerangs to break the mirror, and Top spins Flash into it, because Top wants the mirror to be broken as well. And then we get these images that Barry sees. He sees memories of his mom. Memories that he specifically did not have. Which is weird. And then eventually the effects of the mirror stop, and he's just like, what was that about? Anyway. But meanwhile, we do find out as Iris is going more into the case that Barry is working on helping out the old lady and her son. The top comes to confront Iris and wants to kill her because the top does not want that case to be solved. Meanwhile, all this is going on, Barry is sent to the future where he's being on trial for murder in the 21st century by the Renegades, as well as this judge here. He'll be a big part later on. More or less what they basically decide to do in the 21st century when it comes to trials and solving crimes is they just go back to the past, take the person who's going to do it. Basically, the crime is that they think Barry killed Mirror Monarch, their version of Mirror Master, which of course Barry did not. We find out later on it was actually the top. Yeah, they just called it the top. For some weird reason, like all the other rogue renegades have like different versions of their names, like Commander Cold, Heat Stroke, Mirror Monarch. Top is still just Top. But anyway, they do find out eventually what is going on. Barry is able to get out. He's able to run back in time. Takes out Top with this awesome hoverboard scene, which I love. And what we do find out is Top. One of the things that goes on in the future, and being a police cop, being part of the Renegades, is you cannot have anyone in your family history with a criminal record, aka the person who actually committed that crime in that case that Barry is solving is the ancestor of the Top. So therefore, the Top is more or less going back in time to prevent Barry from solving this case so he could be a renegade. Which I love that Barry basically says, so this isn't about keeping your ancestor out of prison. It's about your job application. Great line. But eventually he does take down the Top. And Jason, the boy, is freed from prison. They solve the case fully. The Renegades apologize to Barry. Well, actually, no, they don't apologize. And they go about their business. Case is solved. Except for that mirror. What's the deal with that mirror? We'll find out a little more about that. We're just going to glaze over the next story real quick because I want to get to the bigger story in this run, which I'm sure most people know. So at one point, though, Fawn is able to escape thanks by Captain Boomerang. Why does Captain Boomerang do it? It has to do with Brightest Day. Okay, but more or less he does free him. Okay, but before we get into the next book, though, or the next story, one of the other stories that's in here that's really cool is Reverse Flash Rebirth. So this is more or less basically the origin of Eobard Fawn. We get to see his past. We get to see his life in the future in the 25th century. How he does decide to become the Flash or become Reverse Flash, but also how much his history has changed. I won't dare spoil too much because this story is great. But let's just say Fawn, when he does get his powers, he decides to change his history around a lot. Specifically, at one point, one of the things that he does is he ends up falling in love with this one woman, and of course she's into another guy. He eventually does kill the other guy. Guy basically erases him from the past so that that's never met him and she gets more closer to Eobard, but end of the day, chick is still not into Eobard. So what does he do? He says, he basically just shakes her head, gives her a brain aneurysm, and then eventually says, I never fell in love. So he ruined this woman's life because she wouldn't be with him. Keeps changing his history. Basically, anything that goes wrong, where, like, because it actually also starts where he has this brother that he can't stand, that he's very annoyed about. Eventually, he gets he Reverse Flash comes back and kills the brother. And it goes from, like, I had a brother, and then later on it says, I was an only child. And it's also eventually where he finds the old original Flash shooting that time capsule. And he decides he wants to become the Flash because he's obsessed with him, loves him, super obsessed with him. But eventually we do find out things do go wrong, as we'll see later on. We get more into that backstory of why exactly Fawn does hate him. But he basically more or less blames Barry for, like, ruining his life and just a lot of, like, petty stuff that I'll get more into in, like, another run, where they'll go more into detail about it. But more or less, yes, this is where we get some of his origin and some of the backstory of why he does hate Barry so much. So I'm just going to briefly go over this story real quick before we get into the next one. So just to give a quick summary, there's this futuristic cop that, again, comes from the future, who's riding this bike that is powered by Speed Force energy. We find out this cop is actually Barry Allen from another Earth. Why is he here? He is trying to stop this time anomaly from happening. And specifically, the time anomaly, of course, is Bart. And because Bart is, like, he's been de-aged and aged so much that, like, this other Barry's like, you're causing too much problem with the time stream. You shouldn't be here. We're sending you back to the future. So he decides to do that. Barry's like, absolutely not. You're not doing that to my grandson. And this is more of the story that explores Barry and Bart's relationship. Because, again, it's like their grandfather and grandchild, but, like, they barely know each other. Barry just got back. Bart's been around all this time. Also, one thing that happens in this, too, is we get introduced to the character Patty Spivot, who will play a big part in the next episode, but this is her debut here. And actually, this is a pretty interesting moment, too, where at one point, Barry's got all this, like, stuff going on. He seems like he's constantly running around. One of the other things that happens is that at the beginning of the story, the Flash family has a picnic. Barry doesn't decide to go because he's still wrapped up busy at his work. A common thing that's going to happen a lot with Barry's entire run, this entire era of books that we're going to talk about next, is Barry's whole, like, thing of having to accept help and accept family, and that not everything can be about him. Not everything can be, like, he doesn't have to do everything. And the Flash family actually tries to have a little bit of a intervention with him to try and talk him down a bit. It doesn't fully work. Eventually it will later on. Fawn eventually does come back. He ends up taking out that other Barry Allen. Like I said, I don't want to get too much detail into it, but this story is great, though. This is great, fantastic stuff. But things do change at one point because... So, there is a moment. I'm going to go back to it real quick. Hold on. Sorry. There's a moment back at the end of the earlier story. Alright, so here's the mirror, because I want to talk about the mirror real quick before I get into the next story. Sorry, I'm a little all over the place in this episode. I just love this stuff so much. Should be somewhere here. Okay, so it's right here. So this is the moment where, obviously, the first case, back to the first case is solved, where the boy Jason, he gets out of jail, he's reunited with his mother, and you hear the mother say, "I love you, Jason," and he says, "I love you too, Mom," and you see this moment where Barry seems kind of sad, because of course he's thinking about his mom, and how much he misses her. Going back to the mirror, one of the things that Barry sees is these images that he never gets, these moments that he never got with his mother. And it kind of more or less, the mirror acts as like a seed implanted in Barry's head to do something. Something that's going to change DC Comics forever. Even they say here it changes. It all changes. Two lightning bolts cross. It changes now. And we go into Flashpoint. So I'm sure the majority of you have heard of Flashpoint, know the story of Flashpoint. Basically, to sum it up, I mean, I'm sure you're aware of it. So what happens at one point, history does change one day, where Barry wakes up, he finds out he has no powers, but his mother is alive and well. And we get this moment where they're reunited. It's a great moment. But as he finds out too, he does say like, "Hey Mom, I'm the Flash." And she's like, "What the hell's the Flash? Are you a superhero like Batman?" So we go into this alternate world where things are completely awry because time has changed. There's a new Batman. Cyborg is basically in the role of Superman. We have all these other new heroes. What exactly is going on, including a couple other new characters, including a character named Citizen Cold. I don't know what that's about. I do, but I'll explain in a sec. But also, this is one of the big reveals, is we find out that in this timeline, Batman is not Bruce Wayne, he's Thomas Wayne. So something has changed, something has happened. Like I said, I'm not burying the lead because, again, like, I'm sure most of you guys know about Flashpoint already, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about it. I will say my thoughts of it, though. I still do love the story, but I think it really, really has been, like, overdone between, like, the show and the movie. The anime movie, which is probably, in my opinion, the best version of it. I actually will almost say I think it's actually better than the comic version a little bit. But, yeah, I really do hope eventually whenever they do another Flash show or another Flash movie, they stay away from Flashpoint for a bit. But outside of that, just talking about Flashpoint itself, this is still a great story. And probably one of the best Flash stories, in my opinion. Not like, I wouldn't say it's in my top 10, but definitely in my top 20. Great Barry Allen story, too. And actually, what was pretty cool about it was that the reason why Geoff Johns specifically made Flashpoint was that, like with Blackest Night, where he gave Green Lantern Hal his own event, he wanted to give Barry his own event. He wanted to give an event that's centralized around the Flash. Because the Flash has never had that before. He's, like, usually most of the DC events center around, like, mostly about Superman, while with some of the other heroes as well, but there's never been one that focused on the Flash. This is the first, and still only one, really. So, of course, we do get this moment where Barry does get his powers back, because he has to get them back to solve what's going on, because Barry is more or less basically figuring out that the timeline has changed. So he now has to get his powers back so he can fix things, including, like, bringing back Bruce, because that's what Thomas wants more than anything. And we see Superman being experimented on, this different version of Superman. Many things happen in Flashpoint. A lot of the characters change. Probably the biggest thing going on, of course, the biggest change is Wonder Woman and Aquaman are in this like giant like civil war. It's like the Atlanteans versus the Atlanteans versus the Themyscirians, or the Amazons. The Amazons versus the Atlanteans. There we go. And it's a big war that is basically more or less destroying this world. Like, their war is like causing so much damage to this world that now it's up to the Flash and Thomas Wayne Batman and Cyborg and all these other heroes, including Elemental Girl to stop them. But of course, one of the things that Barry does think or deduce, of course, is that one of the things that he thinks is going on is he thinks that this is naturally Fawn doing this, because there's even a scene earlier where he finds his Flash ring and he pulls out the ring and it's the reverse Flash suit. So he thinks that it's Fawn doing this, which obviously, I mean, who else would be doing this, right? But then we end up seeing Fawn, and Fawn goes, "Look what you did." And Barry, of course, is like, "Look what you, what did you do to this world?" But we find out that it wasn't actually Fawn who did this. No. The person who caused all this, the person who did all this, was Dr. Manhattan, but we'll get to that later. But anyway, for now, though, the actual moment of who did this, it was Barry. Barry changed the timeline. Barry went back to the night when his mother was killed, and he prevented that from happening. Therefore, causing an entire ripple through time and changing everything. This is what Fawn says. "You were like a bullet for a windshield. You shattered history. The lives of the people closest to you were put on a broken path. You changed time like an amateur. This is your fault, Barry. This hell is your creation. You traded the life of your mother for the rest of the world. Do you remember?" And Barry eventually does remember. He's like, "Yes!" He's like, "Damn it!" "Damn you, Fawn. Damn you. I remember. Excellent. Then it's time to finish it." Because one of the other things that's going on is that Fawn has more control of like the Speed Force in this time. But also one of the things that's cool is that one of the things that does happen is Fawn says, "I was running through the time stream when you altered it. Because of that, you've transformed me into a living paradox. You freed me from the shackles of any history." So what that basically translates and means is that if Fawn dies, he's going to come back no matter what. So you're welcome, future writers. But this is the moment where at one point Fawn is finally going to try to kill Barry once and for all. And then he gets stabbed. He gets stabbed by Batman. Personally, I like the movie more where he gets shot in the head, but the sword still works just as fine. But there is this great moment right before things get awry, because one of the things that happens is Aquaman decides to use Captain Atom basically as an atom bomb to destroy everything. And as this is going on, Barry's getting ready to run back. Thomas gives him this note to give to Bruce. But we'll get back to that in a second. We're going to get into my favorite moment of the book, where right before he goes to change everything, he goes back to his mom. And he more or less tells his mom what's going on. "And if I stop myself, I save them, but I don't save you. There has to be another way. How many people died because of this? How many, Barry? Millions. But I won't let you die. I won't let this life be erased. It won't be. Mom? It happened, Barry. One way or another, the life we had together happened. And I couldn't have been prouder or happier to have a son like you. Sorry. You have to let me go, Barry. I don't want to. But I'll be with your father. I'll be okay. And then at one point, Barry does run back through the timeline. And he sees his past self going to save his mother, and he stops him from doing it. Sorry, I'm just a little emotional. But like at one point, one of the things that he does do is that while he does fix everything, there is some changes. And we're going to talk about it more in the next episode, but yeah, things get fixed, but not entirely. He does come back to the present day. Things are back to normal. He goes back to Batman. And in this great moment, he gives Batman the letter. Letter from his father. Which makes Batman emotional as well. Bruce goes, "You're one hell of a messenger. Thank you, Barry." You're welcome, Bruce. And that's the end. As well as the end of this omnibus. Sorry if I got a little emotional there near at the end, but yeah, this is how much this story and this run really does affect me. And yeah, but alright, prep up more. But yeah, that is the end of episode 9. Like, subscribe, guys, and next time we're going to talk about the new era that happened thanks to what Barry did when he changed the timeline. We're going to get into the new reboot, aka the era of DC that got me into reading comics, the New 52. We'll see you guys there for episode 10. See you guys later.